this design is really versatile, and I think that once you feel comfortable with it, you're going to find yourself using it like naturally in a lot of places. Okay, so let me show you an example of this design used in a larger design. What I'm talking about today is this back and forth arc situation here. That's what we're going to focus on. 2 of you sent requests to be in my live video, but I think that was a mistake, so I'm going to ignore that. Okay, so what we're talking about here, I'm going to show you between 2 lines first. Because what's so funny is this design looks pretty simple, and yet when I started trying to work with it, I kept finding that it was doing things I didn't like. And so hopefully I can address, if you've had that experience, or if you're trying this for the first time, hopefully I can address those sorts of the things that will make it go awry. So if I'm working between in an area that's defined like this, I'll start on one side, I'll make a half circle over to the other side and stop right there. And then I'll move up that line to start my next half circle. And you see that I started here. I'm going to try and end, well, I'm doing it a little slanted, but that's okay. I'm going to try and end roughly across from where I started, and then do the same thing. Slide up the line of that space, and then do the next half circle, and end, and slide up, and do the next half circle, and up, and do the next half circle. So what I used to find when I would do this is that I would start out here, and then as I went, my line would start flattening out, and pretty soon I just had that flat little pancake that was breaking my heart. I was like, why is this happening? So now I know that this first shape was just the shape that it needed to be. It was a half circle. But then what I did on this side is, instead of making another half circle, making this shape the same way, I went up and echoed it. I kept the same space from beginning to end, and then I echoed it again, and I kept the same space from beginning to end. And if you keep echoing that curve, it gets flatter and flatter. Because look at what's happening over here. Look at the distance between the 2 lines in the edges versus in the center. Look at the difference between those circles. The lines are way farther apart in the center than they are at the edges. And that's because even though it looks echoed, it's not echoed. It's the same shape repeating itself and repeating itself. So let's draw that again. When you finally get this, it's going to feel so good, and you're just going to want to make it go on forever. The arc goes over, you slide up a little bit, and you make your next arc. You slide up a little bit, and you make your next arc. You see how this one actually got a little flat? I didn't even think about it next time. I just made my nice arc, the next arc, nice and bumpy. And slide up, and over, and up, and do the bump over. And so one thing that might help you when you're doing this is to be thinking of the shape of a moon, like a crescent moon, because if this pass that you just did is the inside part of the crescent moon, then all you have to do is make the outside part, and then you make the outside part, and then you make the outside part, and that'll keep the outside part, nice and half circular. So Gift said, flattening the curve in a very different way. Right, don't flatten this curve. Let this curve be nice and pointy. And another comment, so the lines on the side hide the moving up. Yes, exactly. Maybe the side is the edge of the patchwork, like you're just doing this in a narrow strip of something, or maybe it's a design you've already stitched. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's you stitch some straight lines. But here's the thing about this, it fits everywhere. So let me just demonstrate. My son is really obsessed with this little saying that you've probably seen with pictures of cats on the internet, where they say, if I fits, I sits. And so he hears me saying the word fits, and now he's thinking about that phrase. So here's like a leaf shape like we made yesterday. We'll put this in yesterday's design in a second. If I'm here at this point, I can just slide up the edge a little bit before I make my first arc, and then a half circle, and then a half circle, and then a half circle. And now they gotta start getting smaller. And there's the last one, and then I can go back out the point. So it fits in other shapes too. What haven't we done? Let's do something weird. So you can make this design fill up a lot of awkward spaces, and so I think that you might ultimately, we talked about what to do a couple of days ago, we talked about what to do in tight spaces, or like, oh, what's gonna fit here? And the things that I mentioned at that time were like, you could go in and echo, or you can go in and put something in there like, pebble your way out of it. But here's a third option. You can arc your way out of it. If you were down here, do those bouncing arcs to get you back to the more open space. So I find this design really versatile. So yeah, let me erase this, and then we'll just pop it into what we did yesterday. But knowing that that's not the only thing you can do with it, right? Like, I just showed this picture. Here's if you had it, you know, if you had some nice long wavy lines that went top to bottom, and then you left some more space between some of them, you could put those in there. And look, there's no defined width for the spaces in between those wavy lines. It's curving, sometimes they're closer, sometimes they're farther, but those arcs are always going to fit once you get familiar with them. Okay, so here it is in yesterday's design. Yesterday's design was come down, arc to the side for that leaf shape. Oops. And then do something in the middle. Come down. We could double it like yesterday. Put a bigger arcs around the middle ones and then arc through. I'm going to put some really neat textural detail into the work. I like the idea of it echoed. Really, anytime I can echo, I do. Is there anything else I want to tell you about this? It works really well in, like, if you wanted to adapt really any design. Like, we'll go over Paisley's more, but we had talked about like these little drop shapes in a feather. You can make your drop shape in the feather even fancier by filling it with those arcs. And then you're up here and you just come back down to the bottom and maybe put a little loop around it. So even though these are funny and they like to flatten out, and when you're trying to get them, it feels awkward. I want you to make friends with this design if you can. Okay, my friends call that bouncing bananas. Yes, that's a really good name for them. Sometimes I call them that in my class too. Everybody laughs. Can you show up and down arc in the same area? Boy, I wish I knew what you were asking. An up and down arc in the same area. I wonder if you're asking if I come up like this. And that the second row is pointing a different direction. Is that what you're asking? I'm not sure. I think that you could engineer this design so that all of your arcs are pointing the same way, but that would mean if you were doing this particular design that you always had to start at the same edge to get your arcs pointing the same way. But I don't think they have to point the same way either. It's just directionally, whatever direction you're going tends to be the direction that the bumps are bumping into. Okay, well, anybody have any questions? I've temporarily stopped giving things away in drawings here because I'm trying to send out fabric, and there's just only so much packaging of things that I'm capable of, and carrying things to the post office that I can sign up for. So right now we're focusing on sending fabric and supplementing some of my income from being on furlough. But we'll get back to it. We'll have drawings again sometime. Any questions or any things that I can weigh in on before we leave this morning? Nice to see you all. How can I combine it with flowers and daisies? Oh, what a good question. You're welcome, Jenny Walk. So let's see. I wonder, so we'll probably get to drawing flowers another time. If you wanted to, you could put it inside the flower petals. And then move on to your next design. That's the first thought that comes to mind. Thank you, MC Westman. You are always so encouraging. Can you draw the leaf vine again, like in the earlier video? Oh yeah, the way we did that yesterday was like this, coming down. Oh wait, are you talking about leaves on a vine? Like, I think you're talking about where we made a stem and then we put some leaves on it. Is that right? And then you come up, and you put a leaf, and then you put a leaf. Wow, what if you wanted to put these things in there? You could. I hope that's what you're talking about. Jenny Walk says, yes, that's what she was talking about. Great. And now because I love echoing so much, I would probably like have echoed all those leaves along the way if I was quilting it. But sometimes what you need when you're drawing and what you're quilting are different. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot. Did you use your machine to demo? Do you use your machine to demo this technique? Yeah, when I'm teaching my classes, I demo these things on my machine. Although, really, some of you on this live have been in my classes, and you know that my whole shtick is really pulling people up to the whiteboard, explaining where they're supposed to go, and then sending them back and having them stitch. Because I feel like if people spend too much time watching me stitch, then they sort of like freeze up and don't want to do it themselves. So I really try and get them stitching as much as possible. But that example that I showed you, it was stitched on my domestic machine.